Good morning.
Good morning.
This is an IELTS speaking mock test taking place at B-GHUD Academy, Mavelikara. My name is Abhishek Saji Matthew. I am your speaking examiner for today. My ID number is 563221. Before we begin the actual speaking test, may I know your full name, please?
My name is Elsa Matthew.
How may I call you?
You can call me Elsa.
Can I see your identification document, please?
Sure.
Thank you so much. There you go. Elsa, how are you feeling today?
A bit tensed, but I'm looking forward to attending this test.
Right. Okay, without further delay, let's move on to part 1 of your speaking test. Here in this part, you can expect a lot of personal questions. Let's begin this part by talking about the place where you live. What kind of housing do you live in?
I live in an independent house. It is a 2-storied house and it is pretty old. It is our ancestral home and it is in the middle of the town.
Right. What do you dislike about it?
The fact that it is in the heart of the town because it tends to get very noisy and we hear all kinds of sounds, especially during the festive season, even at midnight.
Right. Do you prefer living in a house or a flat?
I prefer living in a flat. I grew up in a flat actually, and I prefer that experience because I was always surrounded by my friends. I always had someone to play with and just interact with, but I don't think I get that freedom or that liberty when I live in a house, especially where I'm living right now.
All right. Okay, Elsa, now let's talk about advertisements. Do you like to watch ads from the beginning till the end?
No, in fact, I skip every single ad that comes my way. I don't really watch TV these days, so I usually skip every ad which comes on YouTube or even Spotify.
Right. Is there any specific type of ads that you dislike?
Not necessarily because I don't really watch ads. I try to skip whichever ad that comes my way.
Okay. Now let's talk about talents. Do you have a talent or something you are good at?
I would say I am a good writer, at least that's what I've been told. And I have a blog on Instagram. So I've not been regularly posting for a while, but it's something that I would like to get back into.
Right. Was it mastered recently or you had this talent from your childhood onwards?
I think I've always had it, but I never realized my potential up until I was 15 or 16 years old. I used to compete, and when I started winning prizes for the competitions, I realized, okay, maybe this is something that I can seriously take up in my future as
Right.
well.
Okay. Now let's talk about cars. Do you like to drive a car?
No, I took my learner's license a few months ago and I only attended 2 or 3 driving classes and I was done for.
All right. What do you usually do when there is a traffic jam?
When there's a traffic jam, I usually go on YouTube, probably search for videos and try to just distract myself by listening to music.
All right. Okay, Elsa. That's the end of part 1. Now let's move on to part 2 of your speaking test. Here in this part, I shall give you a question and you'll have to speak on this topic for about 1 to 2 minutes. You will have 1 minute time to prepare an answer for this question. You can make use of the pencil and paper provided. Also, don't worry about when to start or when to stop. I shall tell you when to start and I'll tell you when to stop. I want you to talk about a time you were stuck in a traffic jam. You should say, when was it? How long was it for? What you did while waiting? And how you felt about it. Elsa, your preparation time starts now. Okay, Elsa, your time is up. You can start speaking now.
The time when I was stuck in a traffic jam, there were plenty of times since I spent 3 years of my life in Bangalore, which has the worst traffic in the world. And this particular time, that what comes to my mind happened around a year ago. My friends and I, we were on our way to our favorite fast food joint, Taco Bell, and we absolutely love their naked chicken taco. And this was around 10 o'clock at night. Unfortunately, the hour, it was peak traffic, and we were stuck there for almost about half an hour. The place that we were stuck at, it was an intersection, and thankfully it was only 500 meters away from the shop. So what we decided was, around the time when we were there, when we were inside the car, we just spent our time listening to music and chit chat. But then we were running out of time, and it was already 30 minutes past 10, and the shop closes at around 11 p.m. So we knew that we had to hurry up. And what we did was, we just got out of the car and we walked all the way till Taco Bell, because we just didn't want to miss our dinner. And what we felt about it at that point of time was, we were very restless, and obviously we were craving for our food. And at that point of time, we just regretted our decision of not taking the metro. So yeah, definitely will not recommend going, or going somewhere, thinking of going somewhere just an hour before the closing time, especially in a place like Bangalore.
Okay, Elsa, your time is up. You can stop speaking now. Other than this incident, could you recall any other instances when you were stuck in a traffic jam?
Not anything particularly, because getting stuck in a traffic jam isn't very uncommon, especially where I live. So I think the last time that this happened would have been probably a week ago.
All right. Okay, Elsa, that's the end of part 2. Now let's move on to part 3 of your speaking test. Here in this part, majority of the questions will be general questions. So let's begin part 3 of the speaking test. Are traffic jams common in your country?
Definitely, because of the lack of infrastructure and proper roads. We don't have well-connected roads, and due to this, traffic jams are prevalent, mostly in metropolitan cities and even small towns, I would say. But it's more common in metropolitan cities.
Right. What do you think the government could do to improve this situation?
A few of the things that comes to my mind would be, one, to build better connected roads. The other one would be to not delay constructions too much, because sometimes when there is a lot of work to be done to improve the roads, it takes about 6 months to maybe even a year, and this whole process in itself causes a lot of traffic in many areas. So I think, yeah, stop delaying all these constructions, and to just make sure that they are done within a set period of time, and not to prolong it too much.
All right. As you know, it is always a better idea to encourage people to rely more on public transport facilities, and it is evident that still in many parts of the world, the public transport infrastructure is not that developed. So can you suggest me, or can you give me a few suggestions as on how this public transport facilities could be improved?
I think one of the biggest things that we can do is to rely on the power of advertising and marketing. The fact that we do have a lot of traffic jams is because so many people own their own private cars and vehicles. So if less people take cars and their own private vehicles, and they rely more on public transport, that in itself will encourage people to take public transport on a daily basis. Like, just like how I mentioned before, we could have taken the metro, but we didn't think of it until about half an hour into the traffic. So just showing instances or marketing it in such a way that this is how things could be, and maybe we could reduce the impact of solely owning these private cars and taking your own vehicles. And if we would instead use public transportation, that would probably diminish this whole problem of traffic jams in itself. And
Right, okay. So that is a very good suggestion relating to the need to encourage people on relying on public transport. But as such, what needs or what improvements should be done on the public transport facilities?
one would be to incorporate more routes, because sometimes you won't get specific routes and locations where you can go within a public transport such as a bus or a train. So to include that as well, to incorporate more places, more stations. And the other one would be to have better facilities within the public transportation that we have, which includes air conditioning, since we are living in a tropical country where it's hot and humid almost all year round. That would encourage people to use public transport more. Cars tend to have its own personal air conditioning, so for it's more comfortable for people to travel in their own cars. So yeah, that's another.
Right, okay. So what measures can be adopted to solve the problem of environmental pollution in cities?
One thing would be to use public transport more often and to encourage the use of public transport. The other would be we can reduce noise pollution, at least try and have bans, or make sure to regulate the noises that come or that is generated out of nightclubs or all these party centers, because that would cause a lot of disturbance to the residential area surrounding those places. So maybe placing a ban or making sure that no noises come out of such places after maybe 10 or 11 at night, because that's usually the time when people tend to go to sleep. And to avoid littering, that's another very common problem that we face in India.
Okay, okay, Elsa, that is the end of your speaking test.
Thank you.
Well done, Elsa. You did a very good job to complete the test. She did pretty well. In part one, Elsa did a good job to answer the questions in length. She spoke pretty well without any hesitation at all. Her level of fluency is pretty good. But occasionally, here and there, she had a tendency to repeat the words and the sentences over and over again. When you do your actual test, please make sure that you avoid such kind of a situation. Always try to come up with some synonyms, avoid repeating the same sentence structure over and over again. For example, when I asked her a question about advertisement, she said that she didn't like to watch ads. But again, in the next question, she repeated the same sentence again, which should be avoided. You should try to think of different sentence structures, perhaps a complex or a compound sentence structure. For example, she could have said, no, I don't, until and unless I find something exciting about it. See, so you have to try and follow and come up with different sentence structures. Avoid using the similar type of sentence structure, similar words when it comes to the speaking test. Again, for the next question about the traffic jam, she again repeated the question, the sentence in the question exactly as it is, for which again you should try to come up with synonyms. Right? Apart from that, in part one, she was a bit too fast at times. That could also have been avoided. In part two, that is the cue card session, she again did a pretty good job to speak without hesitation. It is always a good idea to start a cue card with an introduction. We have done a video on how to effectively come up with an introduction for part two of the speaking test. I'll make sure to pin it in the description box below. Right, so it is always important to start with an introduction, which she missed out. This is not a mandatory thing for the cue card, but it would be better if you could state an introduction. Again, related to the main content of the cue card, which is about the time she waited in a traffic jam. She spoke very little about it. She could have added more sentences to make the answer a better one. So always remember to focus on the main content and try to exaggerate a bit. Of course, such kind of a situation may not have happened in your life, but still you should be creative, use your imagination to come up with good points. In part 3, she used a very good range of vocabulary. She did pretty good job to answer all the questions. For one question, she went off topic, for which I repeated the question and then she came back on track. Remember to listen to the questions carefully, especially if your question is a bit lengthy. Chances are there that you might misinterpret it. Please always feel free to ask the examiner to repeat the question for you in case you are unclear of certain topics. On top of that, in part 3, she also didn't come up with good and relevant examples. For certain questions, she could have stated certain examples to make her points more clearer. When it comes to part 3 of the speaking test, to give more clarity to your answer, you can always try to come up with examples. Based on her performance, I would give Elsa a band 8 out of 9. She could have achieved a better band if she had tried to come up with different sentence structures, different types of words or different synonyms, and use of idiomatic language. Okay, so that's it with today's video. I truly hope that this was beneficial for you. Again, I wish to state that it is very important to attend coaching and get proper training and get corrections from expert trainers like the ones we have here at B-GHUD. Hope this video was useful. A sub to our channel would be appreciable. Thank you so much once again for watching.